Hello, welcome to my talk. My name is Joseph Mbele. I'm from Tanzania. I've been absent from this show for quite a while. I think the last video I posted was a few weeks ago, which is unusual. I guess I'd taken a little rest. I don't know how it happened, but I'm glad to be back, and I welcome you to this talk. My name is Joseph Mbele. I am a Tanzanian. I teach here at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. I'm in the English department. I've been here since 1991. That's about 34 years now, quite a long time. Before 1991, I was at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, teaching in the Department of Literature from 1976. My subjects are mostly literature and folklore. I do a lot of research in folklore. I've published a lot of papers, a book, and things like that. Otherwise, let me just focus on what I do outside the classroom, and that's really the subject of my talk today. I'm a cultural consultant. I help people navigate cultural differences, especially Africans and Americans. I help them anticipate, navigate differences that might otherwise cause misunderstandings and tension and conflicts, whether the people are doing business, whether they are in personal relationships, whether they are visiting, tourists, immigrants. So it's been a pleasure helping them understand the cultural differences. It's a pleasure to help Africans understand the way Americans do things, the way they talk, the way they behave, the way they think, in terms of social relationships and social encounters. And it's a pleasure to help Americans to understand Africans, the way we talk, the way we act, the way we think, the way we do things. It solves a lot of problems. It prevents a lot of problems. So in the process, I've broadened my scope, and now I'm talking about people of other countries as well. In this particular case that I want to address today, I'm going to talk about the people of Latin America. I've been lucky to connect with people of Latin America. I got invited to a conference of Latin Americans who were seeking to establish or develop business trade with Africa. So they invited me to give a talk about cultural issues, cultural dimensions of such a relationship, what the Latin Americans need to know about African culture in order to do business successfully in Africa or with Africans. Those are the kinds of things I really like to address as a cultural consultant. So I prepared myself, and in October 2021, I gave a talk to this large gathering of people from Latin America, different countries. They were there. October 2021. And preparing for that talk was quite exciting. I discovered great similarities between the cultures of Latin America, the culture of Latin America and the African culture. So I was very confident talking to these people and telling them there are such profound similarities between the Latin American culture and the African culture. It would be very easy for Latin American business people to operate in Africa. Very, very easy. We share certain values, like we are very family oriented. We are, people oriented. We have a different attitude towards time, for example, unlike, or different from the attitude that United States Americans have, towards time. We prioritize, conversation and networks and networking, getting to know people. There was just a lot. We respect hierarchy, in our social interactions, those kinds of things. And as I've said, we have a similar attitude towards time. We Africans go by what we call African time, and the Latin Americans have a similar concept. So it's a more relaxed kind of way of life, and business is part of culture. Yes, the way business is done in Africa is actually part of the African culture. The way business is done in, say, China is part of the Chinese culture. You can't separate those two. And you need to understand, the culture in order to understand how business works, and vice versa. That's what happened in October 2021. Now, what I want to say today is that I got invited again by the same person who organized the 2021 meeting, Sebastian Galindo Cantor. He's he's co-founder and vice president of the Latin American and African Chamber of Commerce. The Latin American and African Chamber of Commerce. I didn't know they had such a thing, but he knows my work now, and he invited me that time, so he invited me again this time. And this time, it was not meeting, people, for the purpose of doing business in Africa or business with Africans. It was more cultural. There's an event, a book fair, actually, the Bogota Book Fair. That's the occasion. And so the Latin American and African Chamber of Commerce and the Bogota Book Fair, they jointly organized this program, and they invited me to give a talk on some cultural issues. This is a more general talk, it's not so much just about business. And they really asked me to talk about my work, the work I do as a cultural consultant, And the books I've written, there was a stress on the books, and especially since this is a book fair. So I was very happy to be connected that way and to have the opportunity to introduce my work to those people there. So on the 8th of April, 2 days ago, I gave the talk, and it was by Zoom. Very interesting. Interestingly, it was not a formal lecture. Sebastian had a bunch of questions for me, and so I built my talk rather on those questions. It was a process of answering questions. So there were questions about, let me look at my notes here. Styles of communication. Yes, say between the African, the American, and the Latin American cultures. That was a very interesting question. And I had quite a lot to say. And communication is very central in talking about cultural differences or cultural systems. Again, I was able to show how the way Latin American people talk, is similar to the way Africans talk. I stressed things like directness and indirectness. Americans tend to be direct, and that can be a problem. They can be misunderstood by Africans. And the Africans tend to be more indirect depending on the issue, the topic, that's being addressed in the conversation. There were questions about, let me see the note here. The individualistic nature of, say, United States American culture, and the more communalistic nature of the African and the Latin American cultures. That was an interesting topic as well. And I was able to talk about the relationships-oriented nature of our culture, whether it's at work, whether it's in business, we prioritize the relationships. It's not just, getting together and getting into business. We pay a lot of attention to greetings, talking about family and things like that. It's not just one person coming to the workplace. You bring, your family stories, you bring relationships and issues, and you share those even at the workplace. I talked about that. It was quite an interesting kind of situation. There were questions about promoting mutual respect between these cultures, and I had plenty of time and to address these questions. And in talking about this one particularly, I referred to a talk that I've given twice, titled "My Culture is Weird, and So is Yours." And I'm really stressing the idea that each culture, seen from an outsider's point of view, is not normal in some respects, at least. The people in that culture, the people of that culture, see their culture as normal. They don't even think about it. It's natural to them. They might think it's the norm, and things change when they get to encounter people from another culture. And so we tend to look at other cultures as very strange, very weird. And we ask ourselves why these people do this way, why these people do these things this way, why they behave this way. And we need to remember that, foreigners in our culture ask the same questions. And so I'm thinking and saying that this realization that our cultures are really weird from an outsider's perspective, they can be weird. I think that will help promote mutual respect. It creates a level playing field. There's no way you can be arrogant about your culture. No way you can claim that your culture is better than, superior to another culture. Because if you listen to people who are not from your culture, they will show you, how strange your culture is. And so this is the kind of thing I was saying, in response to that question. But I've given specific talks about this. And here I'm just, touching on some of these things. There was also a question on what role oral traditions and storytelling play in preserving cultural identities. Yeah, oral traditions, storytelling, and cultural identities. I opened this question and talked about more things than just preserving cultural identities. I talked about how the oral traditions and storytelling, establishes, and creates social identities. Cultural identities. Yeah, we construct images of ourselves and images of the others, or images of others through the stories we tell. And so we have, strange stories perhaps about others, stereotypes and things like that. They do too. And I talked about Latin Americans and how they perceive Americans, United States Americans, and how stories and stereotypes shape these perceptions, and what stories Americans tell about the people of Latin America. And as a folklorist, I spent a lot of time explaining this. And so it's not just a question of storytelling, preserving cultures, and preserving cultural identities. It was a question of also contesting, creating and contesting those identities. And so I said it's really our duty now to try and fabricate or create our own stories. We have an obligation to create our own stories. We need to seize the opportunities. Otherwise it will be other people telling stories about us. And that's where, great opportunities exist nowadays, especially with the increased, efficiency in the means of communication. Communication technology enables us now to tell our own stories and, project our own cultural identities and contest, stories others may have told or may be telling about us. In a way, technology has created a level playing field. So I had a great time in that conversation. There was a number of people there, and I invited some 2 guests, one from Kenya, one from Cameroon, and it was good to have them there, backing up what I said or clarifying what I was saying. It was a great event. I've broadened my network. yeah, there are people who listened to me, people who heard me that I didn't know before. And yeah, I had a great time. And all this is actually helping me to deepen and broaden my understanding of the Latin American culture. So I can always now claim to be knowledgeable to some degree at least of not only the African and the American, meaning United States culture, but also Latin American. I'm very, very excited that I have these opportunities, and I hope I'll continue to be there and participate in these events. So that's what I wanted to share for today, and I wish you all the best. I will have links below this video to the organizations that invited me, and I request you, I advise you to check out those links. Bye.